Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar with Growth and Scaling Through AI program, our AI 101. My name is Ebba Josefsson Lindqvist, and I'm an AI Change Agent and International Relations Manager at AI Sweden, based out of Gothenburg. And this is our first session in this year's round of GSAI, and I will just give you a short background to why we're sitting here today. So the purpose of the GSAI program is building successful scale-ups in the Central Baltic area. And this is a collaborative initiative curated to provide hands-on support modules to develop AI skills and drive efficient business growth. And the partners of this program is Movexum, Sweden, AI Sweden, Tehnopol, based out of Estonia, and Yrityssalo from Finland, also called Business-salo in English. So to the background of the program and why we wanted to start this. So we could see that the Central Baltic region has a relatively low number of scale-ups. And this could be due to lack of know-how, lack of capital, and relatively small market sizes. And the startups in this region need to expand relevant skills to use data effectively, and there might be limited access to data and large data sets due to the small and domestic market sizes. So about the GSAI project, as we started up now on the 1st of April 2025 and will run for 3 years until 31st of March 2028. There will be 3 different periods and 15 participating companies in each batch, so each year. 5 from Finland, 5 from Estonia, and 5 from Sweden will be selected. The first period begins today with this webinar. We're really happy about that. And then these different periods will be filled with workshops and also expert-led trainings for the companies, as well as personal coaching. There is a budget of about 20 million euros. Sorry about that. So the 2 million euros. And this part of this funding comes from the European Regional Development Fund and the Central Baltic Interreg. And the budget is, of course, divided between the different partners and will also come to gain these startup companies. And today we're hosting first this open session, which is a presentation part followed by a workshop part that is then closed and only open to the 15 batch companies of this year. But welcome everyone who is also joining us just for this first hour of the open session, the AI 101. And with that, I would like to introduce my 2 colleagues, Astrid Sjögren and Kalle Magnusson.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I don't really see you, but it's nice to have you here in the meeting. My name is Astrid. I'm a project manager at AI Sweden, and I've been working for at least 3 years with helping small and medium-sized businesses, including startups, to understand and get started with AI. Over to you, Kalle.
Yes, thank you, Astrid and Ebba. It's super nice to be here. And I work as a AI change agent in AI Sweden for 1 year. And before that, I was innovation leader at an innovation business developer as well in Sweden. And I also run different companies and startups myself. So super happy to be here. And I will be meeting you more in the next session after the first hour here with Astrid.
And Astrid, while you will start presenting your screen, I just want to mention to everyone, so since this is a webinar setup, you won't be able to speak. So if you have any questions, and we hope that you do, because there will be a Q&A at the end of Astrid's presentation, please use either the chat or the Q&A function in the bottom tabs, and we'll monitor those and try to bring up the questions during the presentation or preferably after Astrid has finished up. And with that, it looks great, Astrid, so over to you.
Thank you very much. So yeah, we have about an hour, probably talk around 45 to 50 minutes to dive into AI and its wonderful world. And if you do have questions, I'll allow time at the end, but since it's only written, we won't stop the presentation to do questions. So, but I do appreciate them, so keep them coming in the chat. So I wanted to start out with giving you a little bit of a kind of perspective on what's going on in the world and in the Nordics. So I'm going to start with some statistics just to show you kind of where we're at. And Boston Consulting Group recently released this report, which I find very interesting. Sadly, not with Estonia in the mix. It's more focusing on the Nordic countries. I couldn't find a good statistic with Estonia, so I'm sorry to our Estonian friends. But anyway, what it shows, and what I think many other reports show as well, is that we are lagging a bit behind. Where we see here is white collar regular use of AI, and at least for Sweden and Finland, we are quite below the global average of usage. And if we look at like company statistics, we can also see that especially actually Sweden is lacking behind on getting like profitability from their AI efforts. So this is something that's quite urgent for us in the Nordics, because as we see, the world is also shifting in behavior. So if we look at how consumers use AI now, that is actually way more advanced. So a lot of people are actually using GenAI tools instead of traditional search. This includes, companies that are looking for offers. So most companies should consider like, how are we portrayed in AI tools? Because that is how many people find you nowadays. So things are definitely changing. If we were looking on a national level, a lot of companies are obviously pouring in money into AI efforts. I'm sure you've seen some of these news headlines. Everything from Trump, I think that was in his first week of office, announced a big Stargate project. In the EU, we've also done an AI investment plan. I think France is kind of leading the league right now with their earmarked money towards AI. And China, of course, is doing a lot of things too with less transparency, though. And of course, this, makes a difference. There are some big players out there. The question is always, how can Europe compete with these big countries that have enormous amounts of money to pour into AI? And I kind of wanted to give a little glimmer of hope by focusing on like some trends and cycles that are also noteworthy. And that is that it's not always money who creates innovation, but rather having restricted capacity can also lead to a lot of innovation. I think the most recent example that got famous was China's model DeepSeek. That became the most downloaded app in Sweden for a few weeks earlier. Now they didn't have access to the same compute as many of the American companies, but still managed to make quite an impressive model. And there are other European examples as well. Of course, I want to highlight Lovable as a company that has done quite an amazing journey. If you haven't heard of it, check Lovable out. It's quite cool to create prototypes for sure. So that is something that makes this project so important for me, because our startups in the Nordics are kind of our most important competitive factor. If we can create a good startup system that will create the big companies of tomorrow, that is our good way of competing, because we have a lot of intelligent people that are willing and driven to drive startups. So really happy to have you guys all here in this program with us. And when it comes to startups, really what sets you guys apart, because I'm assuming most of you that are listening are in a startup, is the ability to grow. So Paul Graham from the Y Combinator said this, and I think it's kind of noteworthy to look at the differences between startups and small businesses. Because, a small business is not necessarily focusing on building something big, where as a startup is, and it wants to expand probably internationally as well. So as a startup, you really have to see, real problems, solve them, and then understand how to grow, which is not a small challenge. And that is where AI becomes so interesting, because it does really act as a game changer. Suddenly you have quite different means when it comes to competing to big industry players. because you will suddenly be able to act with way more speed than they are, because they have legacy, they have slower moving mechanisms. You'll be able to scale in a whole different way, because suddenly you can do things that you weren't capable of with the limited human resources. Now you have an AI resource that can work for you. And of course, you can superpower your competence within the team with AI. So AI really gives the growth possibility that wasn't there before. And that is something larger companies can't benefit as fast from, which gives you kind of a good seat as startups at the moment. I think that is one of the coolest things about this technology, is kind of unevenly possible to use. And a good example of this is, again, Lovable. It is the fastest growing company in European history ever. So of course they have very highly skilled engineers in the team, but they are also using in some really good ways to leverage that superpower. So the question I want to try and answer today is really, how can we use AI for growth, essentially? And I'm going to do that in a few different ways. We're going to be talking a little bit more about like how this new wave is affecting us. We're going to talk a little bit about like AI basics. I know not all of you might know everything from our little investigations beforehand. We know that a few of you are quite advanced AI users, so I'm going to try and cover something that works for all of you. And then we're going to talk a little bit about like strategies and how to look at AI in your own company strategy-wise. So that's going to be more or less what we'll be talking about today. So what we see essentially here is, of course, a new wave, a paradigm shift. And as such, it is the companies that are the best at adopting new tech that are the winners. And that's valid for like most industries. The ones that can take on new tech will be the ones that get competitive advantage. And that's something we've seen through the years when it comes to, when the mainframes came in the 50s, 70s, when the personal computer came and, Microsoft was born and became a big company. Essentially, all of the biggest Fortune 500 company we have been born from one of these, from the beginnings of one of these big shifts in tech. So this is where opportunities are created, and AI, of course, nothing less than that. So I'm sure we'll see some of tomorrow's biggest companies being born, if they haven't already in the recent few years. And this is not only about using tech, but it's also how we organize ourselves in our organizations, which is a big part of it. If you have the setup that enables you to scale, that is also what sets you apart from the rest. And if we look at a prediction or hypothesis that the Swedish Industrial Fund has made, which I think is a wise word, is basically saying that, you have to have a vertical application. You have to have some kind of niche, some domain knowledge. And then having, in their case, they're saying algorithms and data that is proprietary, that will really set you apart. And then in the future, you can grow and use it in more domains. And I would say now maybe the algorithm part isn't as important, because we see a huge rise of open source models, which kind of democratize it. But the proprietary ownership of data is still very much important. And having that kind of look upon data as a strategic resource, I think, is super important. But I think if you find yourself placed in sort of, you have a niche and you have data, and that is what you're going for, then there's a lot of opportunity for you in front of you. So this was something they predicted 4 years ago. So let's see how this holds up in the future. Oops, sorry. So yeah, basically our goal for today is to get you to understand sort of how to think, how to frame your strategy in an AI context, in an AI world. So to begin with, I wanted to just ask you a little question. And for you that are going into the second part of the workshop, we'll be thinking more a bit about this, but this is sort of the gist of AI, right? AI is all about predictions. So if you could predict anything about the near future, what would it be? I think this is a good question to challenge yourself with every now and then, because we can predict a lot more today than we could 2, 3, 4 years ago. So this is something that can set you apart and give you competitive advantage. So that being said, let's get into some AI basics and rewind and just take it from the beginning. When we talk about AI at AI Sweden, we typically like to divide AI into 8 capabilities, into 4 families. So basically, of course, AI can sense the world, so understand images, text, translation, and transcription. When it comes to language, you're talking both about code and, of course, human language. Huge capability that has, is part of the hype together with the generative AI. Of course, we also have robotics, where most people think about warehouse robots in like Amazon warehouses. But of course, we have much more common examples, such as, robotic vacuums. At least the advanced models use AI. And then we have the understanding the world family, where most of the value is created with AI today, where it comes, everything from predicting the weather, predicting demand in products, optimizing like hospital flow of patients, or route optimization in the example there. And then there's the great part, where 95% of all the buzz is at right now. And today, about only a fourth of the actual value is created with generative AI, and the rest is more traditional AI technologies. That's also good to keep in mind. However, I think the hype is worthwhile in some sense, because, of course, with generative AI, we suddenly start talking to machines in human language, and it will open up for a lot of people to use technology with actually having technological skills in the same way we used to have to. So that makes it worth the hype, because it will allow us to do many other things. But it's good to remember that not the majority of value today is not created with generative AI, and there is much more to it. However, I wanted to quickly go through sort of the breakdown of a chat product, just to give you that. I think it's a good common knowledge thing. It's a good thing because I am assuming everyone here is using chat products on a daily basis. So this might help you to understand them a bit better. So typically, I do the metaphor of a burger when I talk about AI chat products. And that is because they have a lot of components into them. They're kind of layered. So at the core of it all, we do have the language model that is, of course, trained with a bunch of data. So that's, maths, a bunch of algorithms that have understood sort of how the world works, because I've looked at massive amounts of data. And examples of that are the GPT models, for instance, from OpenAI. And the reason I'm bringing them up, there's so many others, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. But it's because, of course, they were the ones who managed to package it in a good chat product that actually worked. So that's why I'm going to focus on them as an example. And of course, GPT-3 came 2 years before ChatGPT, and it didn't cause all that hype. And that's because that model couldn't actually converse. It couldn't answer a question in the way we expected it to. So OpenAI had to do a bunch of things before they could actually release this as the ChatGPT we know. So what they did in order for GPT-3 to actually be able to handle a human conversation is that they had to show what human conversations look like. So they added a data set, and when you add a sort of specific data set to a language model, this is called fine-tuning. So essentially, they spent a lot of money on gathering data which shows how human conversation works, like questions and answers as we expect them. Huge. And this kind of helped the machine to understand how to give an answer and what kind of answers we expect depending on the questions. However, this wasn't enough. They also had to add what is called feedback, or reinforced learning through human feedback. And this is basically a bunch of people, predominantly in low-income countries with really bad working conditions and salaries. It's not talked about enough. But they essentially had to rate and give feedback on the answers that the language models gives, in order to teach it how and what we expect from it and give it better quality. And they also had to take into account, a lot of violent and graphical information without a lot of protection, sadly. So say what you will about this, but it actually worked. And this allowed OpenAI to actually create a model that could answer in a high quality way. However, it could still tell you, you know, how to murder people, how to create a bomb, all these things that you early users knew. It was quite easy to get the chat model to do that. So on top of this, they also had to add actual instructions. Basically, you know, you're not allowed to tell how you create a bomb, or no, you cannot say racist things. And this is something they've gotten better and better at. However, it's interesting as well to think about it, because it's around 30 people sitting at OpenAI creating these instructions. And some things are easy, you know, black and white, but there is also a huge gray zone when it actually comes to values. And now it is OpenAI's corporate values that decide kind of how this model behaves. And effectively, they're imposing these values onto everyone else. And some of them might be great. Some of them we, from a Nordic or European perspective, might not agree with. So we're all in this kind of big experiment with values currently, where these models have kind of a lot to say the more we use them. So I think that's a reason for us to be involved and concerned with AI development, and also putting money and efforts into not, you know, letting big American corporations have all that power. So that's also something I would love to see more debate about. Anyway, on the outside of all of this, we have kind of the thing that makes it tangible and easy for us to digest this product, and that's the user interface. So basically the website or the app that we all communicate with on a daily basis. And this whole thing is the chat product. And that could be, you know, ChatGPT, Copilot, it could be Gemini from Google, or Claude, or many of the other available options out there. And Chatpilot, so Copilot and ChatGPT actually have the same model at the base, but they have used different feedback, different fine-tuning and instructions. So if some of you have used both, you know there's quite a big difference in quality, and that's partly due to they using different sort of fillings to this burger, which makes the two models differ. Good. So I think this is good to know. It helps you kind of understand what you get back when it answers. Sometimes it's the language model, sometimes it's the instructions that kind of interfere a lot with the answer you get. However, when it comes to like trustworthiness, I think a lot of you have struggled with like hallucinations from language models. I think it's also important to understand kind of the big difference between traditional programming and, in this case, generative AI. One is deterministic and the other is probabilistic. So essentially, when we look at traditional programming, we have written rules. We have you know, instructions that dictate how the program should react. So when you give it input A, it always outputs output B. It handles the defined situation. It is accurate. When we look on the other side, on the other hand, with generative AI and machine learning in general, that is using examples or training data, as we were walking through. And it's not designed to take the statistically most accurate answer all the time. It is actually designed to vary that. And that is what gives you a creative language, which can generate new ideas and have a nice flow to it. So it is inherently designed not to give you the same output based on the same input, but it actually varies. So if you write a prompt 1,000 times, you will get 1,000 different answers. And that makes it great because it can handle uncertain situations. Most situations that we humans work in are uncertain in different ways. And that, you know, allows us to have a creative partner that can help us, and it effectively replaces a lot of cognitive load, which has never been possible before with machines. However, getting it to be both accurate and creative is quite different, because it's, you know, inherently not what it's designed for. Now, all the big companies are working hard on getting models to be both accurate and creative, because that's kind of the holy grail, right? So a lot has happened here already, and there's a lot of tricks and things you can do to get it more accurate. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of something called RAG, and you can also use like these reasoning models like the O1 or O2 or 3 that have come in the recent year. So a lot of companies are betting on these models actually becoming accurate enough to be able to use in very regulated industries. So I know there are quite a few pharmaceutical companies that are really investing into this future where we can have reliable, creative, accurate models that help us with everything from pharmaceutical research to, you know, product development, etc. So yeah, this is quite interesting to get into. That being said, I also want to talk a bit about like how companies today are using AI and how they're looking upon it, because a lot of companies are, using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever AI as a product. So if we're looking at it as a scale, most companies are on the far end here to the right. So they're using AI as a product. It's like agile, it's easy, it's cheap, anyone can do it. However, this part of the spectrum doesn't give you any competitive advantage. This is just basic hygiene factors. You use it and you get a level of productivity that everyone else has that is also using it. What we need Nordic and European companies to do is to move more and more to the left on this spectrum. So of course, not everyone can be on the far end here where we have, the big players, typically in the US, where, you research and you do model development. They have a whole different type of scale, a whole different type of resource need. But there are so many gray zones on this scale as well, where you can use, pre-trained models, add your own data to it, and create something that is quite unique for your company, because you have that niche data that only you've managed to gather, and it's quite hard to get hold on. Or you can just use AI as a service and add a little bit of intelligence from your own organization to make something that's way more custom to you. And this is something I think more companies should think about, like how can we move away from just using AI as a product, but rather making something that's unique to us with the data we have. And I wanted to talk a little bit about which areas are there for value creation, like how should we think about this? So I think there are three main ways in which, we can have value creation with AI. And that is firstly to streamline operations, gain internal efficiency in all kinds of different ways. And that's what most people sort of get stuck in, thinking of Gen AI as an admin improving tool. But then if we move on from that, we can think about how can we actually improve our services, like do product and service innovation. And then at the far end, we have, really changing your business model and rethinking how you're doing it. So let me walk you through each one a little bit more in detail. So basically, there's a company in the US. If you haven't looked it up, you should, because it's quite interesting. And they've been talking a lot about this tech obsessions, trying to do everything automatically instead of growing the team. And say what you will about that, but it's been quite efficient. They're really setting a new standard for the pace in which you do things. And they are an insurance company, and they're really challenging some of the big established players. So what they're looking at is that they're not only, automating and doing some efficiency things. They're really automating complex insurance decisions. And not only that, they're also kind of scaling their expert knowledge. So how can we use AI to make sure that every salesperson we have is as good as our best salesperson? And of course, with all of this, they can increase their speed, their precision, and their productivity. So streamlining operations in their world is not only using ChatGPT for some admin improvement. They're really taking a 360 perspective on it. So I encourage you to look them up and maybe listen to a podcast or read an article about what they've been doing, because it's quite inspiring and interesting, I would say. And then when it comes to product innovation, there's so many things or ways in which you can, improve your services, personalize them, hyper-personalized customer experiences, think of new offerings, having learning and adaptive services with real-time decisions. And of course, Uber is an old example. It's been around for a while, but it's still an AI tool that people choose instead of taxis. Even if you're at the airport, there's a bunch of taxis in front of you and you're still going to the app and order an Uber. And I think that has a lot to do with predictability. We like when things are predictable and you know what you get. And it is also a super personalized offering where you know exactly where you're going, you know the route and everything. So these kind of muscles are the important bits when you think of your customers. Like, how can we actually do something that our customer will appreciate? So to do that, we need to learn more about their customers. We need to understand what they want, because a good algorithm doesn't necessarily guarantee a good outcome. This is where you have to kind of first look at your business and know your customer, and then you can find a good fit with technology. The third part about changing your business, and this is, a transformative opportunity where you can really create new income streams. You have to think about it as not just tech, it's actually strategy. How is my industry going to change in the long and short term because of AI? What decisions can AI support or take over completely in my business? What data do we kind of need to check? Can we package data and have that sold as a separate income stream, or can we leverage that to create completely new products? Should the organization be redesigned? And here, this is where we kind of make movements in the market, and this is where the most innovative companies manage to take over whole new markets. This is sort of where you have the Apples going into the phone business and taking over where Nokia couldn't reinvent. This is where you have industry players that realize something about a technology and can go into a whole different segment. So this takes, a lot of guts and a lot of innovation capacity, but this is where, things can really change. So what makes AI so different? Well, of course, it's going to change the cost structure, because suddenly you don't pay as much to do certain things that cost you a lot before. You can also change your revenue streams. So it does change the DNA sort of the financial bits of the company. It also scales knowledge, as the examples with Lemonade. And all of that kind of increases our speed. It should allow us to do way more with the time allotted. And that also helps us to enable, new products and new services. And that's why this is not just, a tech thing. It's way more than that. It's a paradigm shift. And when it comes to the tech today, there is so much to choose from out there. This is a print screen from Hugging Face, where, you have hundreds of thousands of models when it comes to all different types of possibilities, like computer vision, language, audio, reinforcement learning. There's just a lot out there, and it's an ever-growing toolbox. And what you see here is just like the open source models, and there's of course the closed one as well. And if we look at the best models, there's new ones released every week. They're if not every week, at least every other week, they're beating the benchmark. So your challenge is really to understand the tech and knowing what to use, and be that for coding or mathematical problems, or inspection problems you might have, or audio challenges. There's just so much out there, and this is overwhelming for sure. When we look at all the news, it's not only the models, it's of course all the surrounding tools to that, and that can be something like RAGs, or the latest thing I think is much talked about, which is MCPs, that kind of works like an orchestrator. But if Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, talks about it, it's likely to be quite big. So keeping up is incredibly hard. There's so much to learn, and still we have this problem with AI projects actually failing. Although we have all this great kind of mature technology we can do so much with. There are estimates, this is from Gartner in a recent study, they show that over 80% of AI projects failed. And not only that, but the big problem is that they don't make it to production. So it's not about the tech, really. It's about our inability to take something from a pilot to actually fully implemented. So it takes a really long time, and so many projects are just abandoned after proof of concept, and that can be for many different reasons. So what I think here is, if you can flip this around, if you can succeed with 80% of the projects instead of failing, that is a very unique competitive advantage. But that's not only about having the right tech. Of course, you have to build the right tech stack, but you actually have to have control of your data. You have to have an environment and an organization that supports that kind of implementation. So for the ones that manage to figure out how to quickly move projects to production, that is just a big competitive advantage in today's world, because that really will create value. If we look at some other statistics, there's also a report from IBM that says that only 25% of AI initiative actually have delivered the expected return on investment. So there's a lot of confusion, and that's okay, because AI is an experimental technology. It's still innovation, so a lot of it will be experiments that fail. However, if you can also be better at predicting what projects are going to have a good ROI and knowing what to aim for, again, you're going to have a much better chance than anyone else, and that gives you competitive advantage. And when it comes to kind of the reasons and the challenges with AI and why projects fail, it is not to do with algorithms. That's like 10% of the challenges. It is, as Boston Consulting Group in this case says, around 70%. And there's other companies that have backed this up with the same findings. Like, most of the reasons why we can't realize the return on investment is due to people and processes and like change management. And that can be everything from people being like, skeptical. They don't want to change a habit. They don't trust the technology. There's a lot surrounding that. That means you have to be a good change manager. You have to involve people in the process, let them be kind of the leaders. But then there's also like other things like scoping, actually finding a real problem. I think that is one of the most common things, that people don't actually define something that's worthwhile solving. They focus too much on the tech and the hype. So what we've been sort of talking about for many years now at AI Sweden is how we kind of need to shift our focus from proof of concepts to proof of value. So being technology focused risks you to not create any value. Then you'll be stuck in the hype, you'll be stuck on the cool thing and see if it's possible to do, instead of actually thinking, okay, but how can this create value for us? And that's where you guys come in, because you do have domain expertise. You know something about your business, your field, and that is such an essential component to creating value. So focusing on the value changes the design process. So instead of focusing on the tech and sitting alone and getting riled up and reading all these things on the web, instead look at like what is important in your business, what things would really create value and a difference for you, what are the real problems. And it is like 80 or 90% of projects, according to Ernst & Young, another study, that never make it to production. So by focusing on creating value instead, you're much more likely to be able to get things to production. So when we talk about AI adoption on AI Sweden, for us, it's really about solving actual real problems and finding new solutions that weren't possible without AI. And the key, the hardest part, and the thing you need to be great at is to identify where to use AI and where it makes sense. And then the hard part, of course, is to execute that. But we have this model that I think is quite great of like how we look at it. And to create value with AI, you kind of need three main competences, right? And that is data and infrastructure. Of course, you need to know what kind of data you have, what is an asset. You have to have some sort of AI expertise, ML expertise, which is kind of easy to get. I think the hard part is to have the real domain knowledge, and that is the knowledge that knows what is worthwhile pursuing and what isn't. So when we combine these different knowledges, it doesn't matter what business we're in. If we're doing rocket science or secretary work, that is where we can find actual valuable cases that will create an impact. So let's talk a little bit about like kind of the action plans we can have when it comes to how we should plan, how we should strategize. So I like to talk about sort of different horizons we can have with our AI ambition. So basically there's three different ones. the first one, as we talked about, is like, how can we get, more efficient? How can we automate today's processes to get our operations streamlined and faster? That's usually the first thing you focus on. It's a low-hanging fruit. It's easy, but everyone's also doing it, and it's quite, as I said, easy for everyone else too. The second one, that is about augmenting customer experience, essentially improving your services. How can we make what we do with higher quality, and so that more customers will want to spend money on it, that creating more value essentially. So that is the second part. And that, of course, is more potent in a way, because that doesn't have a limit. The better you can make it, the more income you can have, and that doesn't have a roof. However, making our operations faster has a limit, because you can go, all the way to zero cost for operations, and then there's no further way to go. It becomes harder and harder to push that the more streamlined you are, but there is no ceiling for how much money you can make from better offerings. And then you have the third horizon, which is the hardest one, which is the one where we talked about, like really disrupting or thinking of new business models, essentially shifting the market category or the DNA of your company. But I think all three are worthwhile having in your mind, because if you're not thinking about the third one, odds are someone else is doing it and will shift your business sooner or later. So really think about, like, how will you focus in the future? What horizon are you aiming at? What are you doing about the other two? What do you need to invest in order to take on the other horizons and also have them on the agenda in the future? But I think as leaders of companies, you have to be able to juggle these three. Maybe not all at the same time, but at least it needs to be in the back of your mind. So if we want to look at sort of a strategy for how should you actually go about this, how should you get started? Well, first of all, of course, you need to have some sort of vision, and it doesn't need to be, a long document, a strategic paper. It should just be a very clear formulation around why should you even use AI, without getting caught up in the hype, focusing on your domain and in your opportunities there and what problems to solve. And then you can, of course, also talk about, okay, what do we actually want to achieve? That's where you start planning. You hopefully strategically and structurally map out your opportunities with AI, figure out what projects to do in what order. So basically, you do the prioritization in all the different areas. So this is sort of a structured way to go about it. And then when you have a plan, what you want to do in what order, then you also need to figure out, like, what competences do you actually need for this. You probably can't know everything yourselves. So finding a good partner to collaborate with is coming more and more crucial, especially for us, like Baltic and Nordic countries that have smaller companies. We need to collaborate more. And then eventually you will also have to think about the ethics side of it, create a policy. How do you want to use it? And I think that's a strong suit for us in the Nordics and the Baltics. I think we have companies that are, trying to do something good for the world. So also having, some thought process about what products do we want to use, who do we want to support, and how do we want to contribute to the world with our AI implementations. So that is a little one side strategy for you that you can use, hopefully, in your company. So 45 minutes is a short time to talk about AI. There's a lot more I, of course, wanted to bring up and talk about. But I at least want to give you one advice before I leave, where you can find more interesting content and good examples. That is a platform that we have developed at AI Sweden called My.ai. It's, of course, free for everyone. We sometimes call it sort of a LinkedIn for AI. So anybody who's interested in AI in Sweden or abroad can get an account, and it's like community based. So we share use cases. So there's a huge library of examples of both public and private sector, have they been using AI, both failed experiments and successful implementations. You can find courses online or physical, free or charged courses in AI. You can find events, and you can find lots of other resources and articles. So that is an advice for all of you for further reading, regardless of if you're in the program or not.